What is up, everybody? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you guys are having a good day, great week so far. Welcome to Midnight Hatter Live, the weekly variety show where we talk about Gundam, Gunpla, miniatures, hobby stuff, video games. It's really just whatever we want to talk about, on any given day. I am, of course, your host, Steven, and joining me, as always, is uh, is that a fresh haircut I see on you, Adam Blue?
Yeah, I actually got another little trim,
Just a little.
over the weekend because I had it cut before and it was like the first post big hair cut. And then I was like, "Okay, I need it shaped in a certain way," which it's still a little shorter than I normally, but you know what? It's just whatever.
But at least you don't have to, like, mess with it, you don't have to style it or anything like that,
Dude,
it's
I know, I think back, I do not miss the long hair. I don't.
really?
I don't miss the long I thought it looked cool, like, I like that I could look
Same.
like a samurai for a little bit, but, it's kinda sad too because, like, my wife does have a condition where she has, smaller amounts of hair, and so I kinda feel bad sometimes, like, while I had the big hair and I was like, "Oh, it's so hard to deal with, and I have to do this and that," and
Wow, what a great problem to have, Adam.
yeah, no, that's really and I did kinda feel bad about it, but it was so much work. Like, I can understand, society, how f for women, having long hair is kind of the thing that just kind of the identity, even though that's just an arbitrary thing, but, like,
Yeah.
it
Hey, men have
works.
gotten slapped on television for
Yeah,
commenting on women's hair, so
yeah,
it's not
yeah,
not
yeah,
an
it's a big deal.
insignificant thing.
So, it's just interesting kinda going through that, experiencing myself having the long hair, and I like that this is a variety stream because we can talk about hair for a second. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, well, it's like, I recently caught an episode of Sacred Symbols, and David
Oh,
Jaffe,
yeah.
was co-host, so, yeah, you saw he kind of went off on a little tangent ahead of the time, and he was like, why don't big news corporations just use Zoom and stuff like we do? Like, they're
Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting. I think I remember during the pandemic, wasn't there a little bit of that where I know locally, the local news stations, people were doing it from their house.
Yeah,
I thought that was pretty interesting.
yeah, and I'm friends with a couple of people from the local news station, here that, let me tell you, their Christmas parties are off the hook.
Oh, dang.
You think you know these people from watching them on TV. Well, I have seen them,
Does Hans Gruber
let
show
their
up or
hair
something?
down.
Oh, let their hair down. I see what you did there.
Um, we gotta bring it full circle.
Yep.
But, yeah, we got an interesting show today. There's a lot of stuff to talk about. I do have a couple of things that I wanna share before we hop into it. So,
Cool.
first, let me ask you, Adam, what is
Yeah.
something Gundam that you've been doing this week? I know that you've been working on that Zeta Verka just like I have, but, what else have you got going on?
Yeah, that I let's see, it's been the Gundam Zeta Verka, and I got it to this point, and, we were just talking a second ago to where, like, it's like the other Verka I've built, it's a little rough and not typical to building a Gunpla, but I think it's because it's the aesthetics that they really focus on
Sure.
with it. And but other than that, the other Gundam thing, really, I there's so many. I've talked about this with you before. There's so many model kits I need to get to finishing. Like in terms
Yeah.
of I built them and I just haven't. But I've been playing so much GBO2.
Oh, yeah.
I
Just
it's
PC spamming.
there's something about it being on PC that just makes it easier for me to get in, even if the game itself takes longer to load. I know that there's been a lot of people having network issues. I haven't. I've been able to get into ranked matches quicker than on PlayStation.
Well,
It could
doesn't it
just be
prioritize by connection? So, like,
so I wonder, and I think where I'm at, I have a awesome connection, so I just wonder if it just uses me as, like, the main connection. I don't know because I mean, I'm at, if for the GBO people in the chat, I'm at, C minus now, which is pretty good considering it just came out and you have to get the win in order to increase your rank. So I'm
yep.
pretty happy. And shout out to Talos, but also everyone else. Like it feels like in the past couple days, like it's just clicked with me. Like I've now been using raids more than I ever would. Um,
Yeah.
I got this new Jesta raid where you actually like the enhanced Zeta, you actually hold down the melee button to charge up the beam saber, and it's like some sort of like stab slash. And I will just
So
go around the
cool.
map because you're stealth. I will go around to the back of the map and just start slashing everybody up. And yeah, it's been a
Pretty
lot of fun.
savage.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah, we need to get the crew together again and do some more of those, scenario matches because that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I know.
But yeah, on the subject of Zeta, I have transformed my Master Grade 2.0 Zeta for the first time.
Ooh.
A bit of a pain in the butt to transform, but I am impressed with the level of compression that we've got going on here. Like they
Yeah, it's
really
flat and wide.
flatten this sucker down.
That
So
looks good. And let me ask you, this was you haven't done anything special to it. You just built it and now you're testing the transformation.
yeah, yeah, just kind of seeing how things fit together because if I do, end up kind of painting things or, I'm obviously going to panel line, but, whatever I do to it, I want to make sure that it looks good, both transformed
Yeah.
and standard.
Now,
Um,
would you compare are you able to compare, like, the transformation versus, like, the high grade or real grade?
so the high grade is not much of a comparison because the high grade is parts forming, you basically just take all of the parts
Oh,
off of the
yeah.
kit and then
That's
slap them
right.
onto so that's, kind of weak, but
Right.
I will say that compared to the real grade, it feels a little more sturdy, which is surprising because the transformation mechanism reminds me a lot of, like one of these third-party Transformers kits where the legs are held on by like and let me see if I can just disassemble part of it. So it's nice that it's got like little pegs and things to snap together and hold
Yes.
parts where they're supposed to be. So that's always good. So the legs are held in by this little gray flap behind the backpack, and they kind of unhook and unplug from the skirt. And so like the entire leg joint is held on by what is essentially a 4 millimeter piece of plastic. So when this
Ah.
thing's not, compacted and tightly fit together, that leg is just kind of like flopping in the wind.
Hmm. Yeah, to be honest, just l there's something about the Wave Rider, I've said it before, I think it's a sick design, so when I saw you holding that, I was like, especially that size, like, I think like, I'm enjoying the aesthetics of building the Verkov, but I think I also need to get that 2.0 because I would love to have like we talked about, like, maybe put the head on the other one or have one transformed, one not.
Yeah.
Also, the 2.0 comes with that hanger piece that connects to the catapult deck of the Mark II Master Grade.
Yes. Yeah,
So,
that's awesome too.
yeah.
Um, Now I will say this much, and someone has to say it, is if the Master Grade Turn A Gundam is going to come with a cow that fits inside of its catapult deck, then I think it's a shame that we do not have a single Master Grade Zeta that comes with a Zaku head.
Or no, that actually makes a lot of sense. I was also gonna say, and this is actually morbid, maybe I shouldn't say it, but a monkey. Do you remember that scene
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, there's so many memes to go along with the
with
Zeta
the
that
Zeta? But yeah, the Zaku head seems like a really good idea just in general, just to give it more option parts that may
yeah.
because, yeah, the Verkad doesn't have that mega bazooka launcher, right? Or whatever the thing's
Yeah,
called,
the
mega
Hyper
particle
Mega
cannon.
Launcher,
Hyper.
doesn't have a
There you go.
stand that comes with it at all, so,
Yeah.
like, if you're gonna do any kind of entry and I do have to disassemble my 2.0 because I feel like I must have screwed something up in the feet or ankles because my kit just does not stand on its own. Like, it doesn't matter how I pose it, how I get the feet situated, doesn't stand
It's,
at
like,
all.
loose and just or
It's like the ankles are a little too rigid, and so they kind of always stick up on their toes,
oh,
yeah,
interesting.
it's a
Yeah,
little weird.
there's always something, and sometimes I don't realize it until, like, a year later, I look at a kit and wait, "Wait, did I not do this right the whole time?" And I already took pictures and did a review and posted it for the world to see? No.
Oh, man, if you knew how many kits I've gone back and, like, when I'm customizing them, I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna take it apart to paint it." I realize, "Oh my god, I put the left foot on the right leg," and it's like, it's obvious, like the Marasai, for instance, it's like, that the foot is angled a particular way because of the Marasai's leg shape, so it's like, what an idiot.
That's hilarious, but I like that that's a common thing.
Yeah.
It reminds me of when I would get a Lego set, and I'm like, "They forgot to put pieces in this." And then it's like later, it's like, "No, they're there. They're there."
They're there. The other thing I wanted to share, unfortunately, I regret to inform you guys that there's not going to be an episode of Dissecting Gundam this week. I know it's a shame, but I do want to move to a little more of a relaxed schedule because it's been getting in the
Good,
way of a lot of other projects that I've got going on.
good.
I do want to share a product that I have stumbled upon. These guys are nano LEDs, so you probably can't even see the wire. 3
Yeah, just
millimeter
barely.
battery powered, or
Wow.
3-volt battery powered, I should say. Um, Pretty potent little LED, right?
Yeah. Where did you get that from? Is that at Amazon or a China thing?
That was an Amazon find.
Oh.
I've got another, China find that's gonna be debuting on the channel soon.
Oh,
So,
okay.
here we've got a standard little high grade, Thunderbolt Zaku 2, and again, you probably can't see the wires, but, bum, there we go. We
Dang.
have a lit mono eye, and what's amazing about this, I did not have to cut anything inside the
Okay, I
headpiece.
was just asking. You just slid it underneath, right?
I just slid it right behind the mono eye,
Wow.
part that's in there.
Alright, that is a game changer.
Total game changer. So expect a video coming out about these soon because I have some other neat tricks and tutorials that I want to show off because
I bet.
you know me, I'm always extra. I've got to take a cool product and then I'm going to say, how can I make this better?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm excited about that, and I'm excited to be doing some more miniatures and hobby work.
Cool. But I see the chat, we've got our, uh, some
Yeah.
of our regulars in.
Shout out to the
Robert.
chat. I see Pyro.
Yeah.
I saw Robert got the snipe. um,
Yeah.
let's see.
Sonic
Nike is
Shadow,
bringing up some of these new kits coming out. Zionic Shadow. Dan, how's it going, buddy?
Talos. Yeah, good to see everybody.
Yeah, yeah. Good to see you guys. Hope you guys are excited for this topic. I know that it's not.
Yeah.
It's a let's say it's an unusual topic for Adam to be talking about, but I think that we're going to be able to tap into some of your video game knowledge for this.
Well, not only that, but the board game aspect, because I think board games
Yes.
fall in these different categories. There's like the family game, and
Yep.
then there's the more like involved, maybe tactical games that people play. And sometimes there's that middle ground. And I just think with my family, we've been playing like Sorry, Monopoly, Uno. But I think the kids are old
Sure.
enough where I want to start getting into some games that might be a little more involved. Like I was telling you, uh, my son got a Five Nights at Freddy's board game and it was super involved to the point where he didn't even care for it because it had all these arbitrary things that the
Yeah.
playing wasn't related to FNAF. It was just like you roll to move into a room, and if there's an item in a room, you pick it up and you just collect pieces. And it had nothing really to, but there's something there. So I think this is a good topic for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. So let me hop over into our screen share view because I do have some visual aids that I would like to share with you guys. So the reason this came up is because I saw that there is a Metal Gear Solid board game adaptation that's available for pre-order now. It
Hmm.
has some fantastic looking mini sculpts, probably some of the best mini sculpts I've seen from like a Kickstarter or, community backed game, whatever you want to call them. I was surprised that they were able to get the IP, obviously.
Yeah.
Let me scroll down
Knowing
here.
Konami.
Excuse me. So yeah, I do want to get to some of these sculpts because it's pretty impressive. And what I
Uh,
like about this in particular is that it is a board game. When you think about like tabletop gaming, obviously you've got the tabletop RPGs, your Dungeons and Dragons,
right.
that kind of thing. You've got your miniature wargaming like Warhammer, things like that. Board games are something that like you said, you kind of have this impression of like Sorry, Monopoly, like those types of Milton Bradley games. But
Yeah.
there's like this whole realm of games like Gloomhaven
Right.
and Pandemic and these other types of board games that are designed to be played cooperatively. Um and this is one of those games.
That's
And
neat.
in particular, what I like about it is that it is stealth based. It's designed to play like the Metal Gear Solid video game. Um, so yeah, let me show off some of these sculpts. Shout out to Big Child Creatives. They're the ones that did the sculpts on these pieces. And it's got this seamless. I watched a review of the board game and they said it's okay. um,
Oh, okay.
which, I'm probably not going to get it anyway, but it's got this seamless transition between stealth sections and stealth gameplay and then boss battles, which the fact that you can even attempt to do boss battles in a
Yeah.
board game
In a board game.
scenario seems
I
kind of
know.
crazy. And I'm obsessed with, like, obviously video game AI, but also like board game AI. Like, how do you represent a the looming threat of um of a boss? Like, do they
Yeah.
just have a cycle that they go based on, like, every turn, something like that? Um, it's very interesting to me. So there is another game that I know of that I have that has a sort of enemy AI associated with it, and it is a Kickstarter game called Wild. This is
Hmm.
kind of an interesting game because it's a cooperative sort of dungeon crawler, but it's also a deck builder. So each player represents like this
Oh,
sort of elemental person that's collecting all of these monsters in like a deck of cards that they use to fight. It's kind of like Pokemon meets D&D, something like that.
okay.
Um, but it has an AI deck. So like every turn you pull a card off the top of the AI deck that you shuffle, and that's what determines what the enemies are going to do.
Ah, that's neat.
Yeah, so very cool. Similarly, the Metal Gear Solid game, see, I've got Gloomhaven pulled up here so that we can talk about that as well. Similarly, the Metal Gear Solid game has patrol cards for the guards that are kind of patrolling the area, and each of the cards is a 9 square tile, and it shows you what path the guard is going to follow across 9 squares of the map. Pretty simple, but
Okay.
pretty
That
cool.
yeah. Ooh. And let me ask you, like, because looking at this, I mean, that just looks badass on its own.
Yeah,
With these board games that are more of the for an older audience that come with miniatures, how much of it is a company just wanting to make miniatures and it just comes with a game? Or how
it's a
much of
good
it is
point.
people buy it just for the miniatures?
I mean, I have to say it's probably a strong it is about the miniatures to me, because
Okay, yeah.
not only do people want these things, but like people want to make them too. Another popular video game IP that was adapted into board game by Steamforge, which I think Rogue brought up
Oh,
in the
Resident Evil
chat,
2.
is the Resident Evil board game, Resident Evil 2. Um,
And then there was the Bloodborne
yes,
and maybe even
Steamforge
Dark Souls,
also
which
did
oh, they
Dark
did that
Souls.
because and I wanted to buy it just for the minis because it was the only way to get some collectibles of that, and the same with the Power Rangers. There's a Power Rangers one, and it was the same thing. I was like but then it's like there's this game, and it's like, "You know what? That's like the next step I need with all my collectibles. I needed something to do with it."
Yeah.
And the game thing makes sense. I think it's almost like I need to do this more than I realize.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I wanted to talk about it, because I think
Cool.
that there is definitely potential there. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of IPs that are being adapted, and they're basing a lot of the gameplay mechanics off of things like Descent, which is a Steam forged game. Similar dungeon crawler where it's like the minis are 95% of the the reason you would want the product. But
Yeah, even Rogue is saying that he has the Dark Souls one.
see,
That's
there you go.
awesome. Wow.
Yeah. And I would say the same thing for Gloomhaven. Gloomhaven, even though, I mean, this is probably like the peak of adult style board games would be Gloomhaven. I mean, you can do full-fledged campaigns where you like pick up where you left off and stuff like that.
So
So,
it's almost like you're saying it's more fully realized than most, but without being a complete tabletop RPG?
exactly. Yeah.
That's cool.
So, it got me thinking, like, how would you go about A, creating a sort of board game, not a miniature war game, not a RPG like Gundam 5e, but
Yeah.
like how would you create a board game for Gundam, right? And now, cards on the table, I've got the Gundam board game. And this is not an unsubstantial, like this is a hefty box. This is actually
Is
the same size as the box that Wild comes in.
is that different than the Zeta one you had?
Yes. So this one came out in 2020 by a company
Oh,
called Plex. The Zeta Gundam board game
Yeah,
is from 1988.
that's cool.
Now, this game, the Zeta Gundam board game is loaded with gimmicks. It's got miniatures. It's got, you know, it's got one of those like secret spy glasses, like the red that you hold over a card in order to like reveal secrets. It's got like a
Mm.
spinner wheel. I mean, every board game gimmick you can think of, the Zeta Gundam board game has got it. But at the end of the day, it is just a competitive game. One player plays as the Titans, one player plays as the Ayug, and you duke it out.
Okay.
Um, the Plex Gundam board games each covers. So there's three of them. One starts at side seven. One of them starts, Soldiers of Sorrow like Jiburo, and then this one covers Abaoku. Um, they really are just like covering beat for beat what happens in the show. And
Mm.
also no miniatures, all punch cards, like little
Huh.
cutouts. So I'm like, come on, you could
Is
do
that
better than that.
reflective of the price?
You know, it was a $90 game, so
No,
I mean, it's not
that is
far off in price
yeah,
from Metal Gear.
yeah.
I think Metal Gear is $100. The Resident
Even
Evil
the
2
Power
board
Rangers
game.
one, I think, is like 90 or 100, and it has the miniatures. That's interesting. Maybe
Um,
I bet that IP maybe is just a little more expensive,
could be so.
to work with, yeah.
Could be
Hmm.
so. But yeah, and I was interested in like how these board games try to adapt certain video game mechanics into the gameplay. So like for instance, one of the things I absolutely love about this Metal Gear game is they have surveillance cameras. And if you've ever played Metal Gear Solid, you know that like the trick with the surveillance cameras is when they're turned one way, you get underneath them and then you can they'll turn the other way and you can go. Well, so every surveillance camera is a square and it's got a red side and a blue side. And then you have a token that represents which way all of the cameras on the board are facing. And so every turn you flip the camera token and that's what determines, your camera direction. I thought that was a clever little
That
way to
is.
represent the same sort of gameplay.
'Cause what
Um,
it's trying to do, and I think this is where they get creative, is how can you make it feel like a lived in experience where there's things happening that is not of you, having to move things around. It's almost like when
yeah,
I'm a kid playing with toys. I have to be the bad guy and the good guy. It's like I wish somehow the
exactly.
the the antagonist could be its own thing and I interact with it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
So, and there, I think that there's ways to do that. Obviously, you can have like the AI deck of cards, like the way that Dire
Yeah,
Wild does it. You could
I
have
like that.
AI dice, where like maybe you have two dice that, one of them has like a direction to go, and the other one has like a
Oh,
like what they would do. Like, would they attack? Would they,
yeah.
support? Whatever the case may be. Or even have it like be prioritized where it's like, okay, if they're in combat you roll a die, then they attack. If they're not in combat, then they would do something else. I don't know.
Yeah, I
um
think, for like the Gundam one, the first thing that comes to mind would be it being more like a Risk, or Catan, and
yeah.
because I guess we're trying to, not talk about, like, what are they called again, where you just have the figures and you
Oh yeah, the
battle.
miniatures. Yeah, oh, like miniature wargaming.
Yeah, if we were to, yeah, step away from the wargaming, it would be more of a Risk, where the scenario could be like you were talking about with the other game. It could be, AU, Titans, and then there's, like, areas on the map, but that could leave room for having the ships along with mobile suits and all that, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, I mean, I would love to have like ships incorporated into it somehow. The
Yeah.
Zeta Gundam board game does, each player controls one ship, so it's like you have the Radish, you have the Argama,
Mm,
I think the
I like that.
Alexandria and the Dogos gear. So each player controls a ship, and each ship has four mobile suits on it. Kind
Oh,
of
okay,
cool there.
that's cool. Yeah, that is cool.
But yeah, again, trying to get away from like that competitive aspect, but bringing in more of that like gameplay AI, like a cooperative game, like a
Yes.
Gloomhaven or a Descent, or Metal Gear or Resident Evil. What, like, how would you represent the antagonist of the game? So, you know, and then B, what would the gameplay be like? It's interesting to me that the Resident Evil game and the Metal Gear Solid game strive to create an experience that's similar to the video game. Is there a video game experience that you could capture from a Gundam video game and put it into a board game, or would it be like just straight up combat? Would you have missions that you would have to try and accomplish?
It almost reminds me of, without getting to that, yeah, again, the miniature wargaming, but like SD Generation Genesis, like we talked about on your last stream about like the optional objectives. I feel like that's a cool component to add if there is a sort of a mission or a campaign where it's you know, there's more to the world, and it could be based on dice or cards where you're doing something. It could be something in the world that affects you, but there could be optional things that you can do that you can then carry on with you to further scenarios. Like
Yeah,
it could be like there's scenario based, like a mission on the board. Once that's complete, maybe there's something you do that you're sort of shuffling decks or things that go on the ground that maybe build out the world or something. I mean, honestly, it almost seems like it's almost limitless because of the limitations versus gaming because you're programming. Everyone just goes to the default, okay, skill based action. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
pretty much.
Yeah.
Like, I think that there are certain video game sort of recipes that work, and so
Yeah.
people tend to
Stick
go
with
for
that.
those.
Yeah.
Um, Now there are some miniature Gundam games that are that are out there. So let me pop back into the screen share view. So you guys might have saw in the thumbnail that there were some miniature Gundam, you know, something going on there. So those actually came from two different games. One of them's Strategy of Gundam, which as you can see, uh pretty inexpensive for some Gundam miniatures.
Yeah.
And
That
really
is.
really sweet detail, honestly.
Especially if they're already painted like that.
Yeah. You know, so if they come out of the box like this, like, dang, I
That's cool just to have for that price. Y
yeah, right?
Yeah.
So, shout out to Hobby Link Japan if you guys want, few of these little guys. It looks like it's a 12-piece set.
Interesting, and being 1/300, there's, so much you could add to that, of the bigger, boss battles,
Right,
you
you could
know?
you could have
Yeah.
a ship, you could have a mobile armor. I mean, like, these guys are the 1/400th scale
Oh,
Gashapons.
yeah.
Um, so I mean, basically they already have the sculpts out there, so the miniatures exist. It's just coming up with a game
But
that really
yeah.
suits Gundam.
What's
um
well, what is a game when you think of playing a board game with people? Are there, like, certain ones that come to mind? They're like, "Oh, yeah, we'll always have fun with this or that."
that's a good question. I've played Gloomhaven and I really enjoy it. I and maybe this is just my smooth brain kicking in where it's like I wish there weren't so many mechanics tied into it.
Oh, no, I know what you mean, because you want it to be easy to just introduce to anybody. Have friends coming over, "Oh, let's play this game about the Gundam universe." It's easy, and then they'll learn about Gundam.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I used to play Axis and Allies with my
Oh,
brothers,
yeah.
which is like grown up Risk. It's like
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, you have Risk, but then now you have like resource management, and there's a lot of resources to manage. But
Hmm.
the classic example of the co-op dungeon crawler board game is Hero Quest, which I used to play with my dad all the
Mm.
time back in the day. And
Okay.
it had different scenarios in the booklet where it's like, the gargoyle is like the bad guy for this scenario, and you have to navigate this dungeon. Now, of course, the mechanics there are a little too simple because then it's just basically all combat, right? Um,
Yeah, something I like is from, that game Carcassonne, if I'm saying that correctly. Do you know of that game?
I'm not familiar
And
with that one.
it's like you get tiles one at a time, and you're just building your city, and someone has their turn, you have your turn. But as you get the tiles, you're then building roads that connect, and then once they all connect, it maybe then builds a lake in the middle, and then you get points for that. And I feel like maybe that is a way to maybe have a basis of the game where you're getting these random cards that you're laying down. You're almost like building out the movement of your fleet, essentially,
That
instead of
sounds
like a
cool.
building. But it would incorporate maybe, yeah, the dice roll. So as you're building out your movement of a fleet, if you do interact with AI or something, then there's the other mechanic that opens up. It could be one of those spinners, it could be a dice roll, and then it's like, okay, now there's a battle with, based on your fleet setup, how you would do against the other fleet.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, that
you
that
know
that incorporates a lot of those, like, RTS elements that you and
Yeah,
I love,
exactly.
um, and then, of
Yep.
course, if you could if the game map were, dynamic, if you
Mhm,
could change the game map, like, I love Heroescape, yeah, that's a fantastic sort of miniature war game, a little bit more dumbed down than, like, a Warhammer or a BattleTech, obviously, but,
mhm.
obviously, the big thing about Heroescape is that you build the map out each time. The problem is,
Yeah.
my brothers and I would spend 4 hours building a map for a 45-minute game, it's like,
That reminds me, when I would play with my action figures, I would spend the whole time making the level, the place, like, where all the figures are, and then I'd play for, like, 30 minutes and be like, "Eh."
alright, that
That's
was fun.
interesting. So I guess it's almost like this kinda goes back to what modern games are doing. It's almost like having a building mechanic as part of the game experience. Yeah, so
Yes.
building a fleet that then that it's dynamic in the way that you're constantly building a fleet each turn, and then as you're, interacting with the AI, you're having to use whatever you've done with the fleet to be able to battle, but also you might wanna change your fleet loadout. And I don't know how much, like, if there's a line that's drawn with, like, electronics that are associated with it. Like, what if there was a board that had a little light thing that randomly projected stuff onto the board that would change.
That's a clever
Yeah.
idea. So what I was thinking about one of the so this, right here is a flexible magnetic sheet. It's
Oh,
it's
okay.
just it's like a scrap from what you would see like made out of car magnets, right? Like that kind of
Oh, yeah.
stick to cars and stuff like that. If you could imagine a game mat that was maybe just a blank star field and had a grid printed on it made out of this material. And then of course, you can come in and do I have anything magnetic around here that I can use? I mean, I've got
That
magnets.
reminds me of, like, I think it's called color forms. What was the thing when we were younger that was like it was like the static page of, like, Ninja Turtles, for instance. It would be the sewer, and then it came with a little stick and peel that
Yeah.
you could redo, and I would make scenarios.
Yeah,
That is
exactly.
that is a great idea.
So and
Yeah.
and this is portable, obviously, you can roll it up after the fact, when you're done playing and you've got it packaged and ready to go. I think that this material would be a useful one for that
Yes.
type of game where you could dynamically change the map. Maybe you've got map tiles that are magnetic that stick to it, and that way you
Oh,
can kind of
and
save formations.
yeah, and then what if certain depending on the magnetization of certain items, the polarity, if they're close to each other on the board, that could trigger something, like, they would if you had to move something somewhere and then they'd stick to each other, that becomes a new dynamic or something,
See,
or
now I'm
they're
just thinking Tears of the Kingdom, like everything's.
oh, that's literally what all we're doing is Tears of the Kingdom.
uh,
Everything is Zelda.
Yeah, everything goes back to Zelda, which as it turns out, a few weeks ago, I did have a dream that someone, I think it was probably Steamforged, was coming out with a Legend of Zelda board game, and I
Ah.
was, like, waiting outside of, I think, a Costco for them to open, and I was gonna go
Oh,
buy it
wow.
for my wife and I. So then I looked it up, and I was like, "Huh, I wonder if there ever was a Legend of Zelda board game." There was, Milton Bradley made it, and it was
Oh.
awful.
Oh,
It's like, it's what you would expect a Milton Bradley to put out.
I see.
Um, but yeah, I think that there is room in the market for one of these grown-up style board games
Yeah,
that, part of the feature is obviously you get a ton of little Gundam miniatures.
yeah.
Um, and heck, you could even do it up the way that Resident Evil 2 does, where you've got expansion packs where it's like, you know, you've got these add-ons to the game where it's like, so in the original game, I think you can only play as four characters like Leon, Claire, Ada, and
Chris, probably.
Chris, maybe? I don't know. But yeah, now you can play as Brad Vickers, you can play as Hunk, the
Oh.
the umbrella guy. So, and that of course introduces new mechanics too. Because let's say you're
Mm.
playing as hero characters from Gundam. So, like, if you pick Char, you have certain, abilities that come with playing as Char, but you also have ulterior motives. Like, each player might have a hidden goal that they have to achieve apart from the group goal.
Mm. That's cool.
Um, which that's been tried. There's that PlayStation game, Hidden Agenda. Are you familiar with that one?
Oh, that sounds familiar.
It's,
Yeah.
so it's like a mystery game, you're playing
With
as
the
one
app?
cop. Yeah, it had a
Yeah,
companion app, and
I
so, like,
remember
what
that.
would happen is the one player would be controlled by up to 8 player characters, or reverse that, 1 character being played by 8 players, and each individual player had, like, their own hidden goals that they had to achieve apart from the other up to 8 people, so
And almost like Uno in a way, it's like once you get your goal done, you could say, "I've completed it," and then the characters verify, it's like, "You won." So it's
yeah,
almost like you have to think like, yeah, you could be on the Xeon side and be Garma and be Shar, but, like, you don't know, even though you're both trying to stop the Federation, what could each one be doing individually, you
yeah.
know? Yeah, that's I like that. That's a good idea.
So yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely potential in doing something like that. One kickstarted board game that I did not pick up, but had it came with like over 300 miniatures was Midara. Are you familiar with this one?
No, no. Huh,
Midara was one that was really hyped up. It was like the anime board game. Let me see if I can pull this up so that I can show you guys some
okay.
of these minis because Midara, now, I will say that they are guilty of one of the things that, drives me nuts, is that their logo, uses Cinzel Decorative, which is a font that makes the graphic designer and me cringe because it's like a Google standard font that, like,
Oh,
every
like a Comic Sans?
yeah, papyrus, whatever you wanna
Papyrus, yeah, that
So, here we've got Madara, and like I said, very anime inspired. I think you
okay.
start off playing as, like, kids in a school. Um
Oh, okay, yeah,
Something like that. It's like the typical shonen anime. Uh, Looks like they're gonna be back in stock here August 2023. Um, but yeah, I mean, tons and tons of add-on bonuses for these things.
that's cool.
Um,
Yeah, so these things then are successful, even though I kinda never really hear about them. If they're making expansions for some of these games, it must be that they make enough money, you know?
yeah, I mean, I think that the Kickstarter for this game made like something close to $3 million.
Wow, wow,
And so yeah, the base set comes with several miniatures. The Kickstarter exclusives added up to like 300 some odd miniatures. So I mean, most of their production was probably the
probably
miniatures.
miniature. And is it typical for people to be painting these miniatures that come with these board games?
I mean, I would. I feel like
Yeah, I
it's
would too, yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's like part of the fun is like
Okay,
Warhammer,
cool.
right?
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, but I feel like there's a lot more to do because then you end up having, God, that is a mess of tokens. I would not want to be the guy that had to clean
has
that
to
up.
sort 'em out. Yeah,
But yeah, it's these tend to have a little bit more objective to them. It's not like just a straight up Warhammer, like we're gonna slug it out and
yeah.
the best man standing wins. I like the idea of having objectives. And Heroescape did that too with like there were scenarios that you could play where it's like if you don't destroy the hive in 6 turns, like the bad guys win.
Well, let me ask you then, because I've never played a co-op one. What is like, how does a co-op one work?
There are
Like,
a lot of different ways to do it, I think. Um
because I can almost think, like, if you're playing co-op with someone, it's almost like you could say, "Well, do this. This would be the best thing." And it ends up really just being the one person.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, I would hope that people would kind of like, you know, try to think for themselves and do something. And this is where I think that the hidden agenda mechanic comes into play because then maybe you do have one of those domineering players that says like, oh, that's not the optimal thing to do here,
Uh,
you should do this, and it's like, well, maybe I don't want to do that, like
I see then. I kinda see where that idea of having that kinda hidden agenda mechanic works in these games. Because, yeah, it almost reminds me of, like, when you're playing N64 GoldenEye. It's hard to
yeah,
go back to split screen. It's like
it
there so
is.
when you're playing a board game, there's only so much you can hide from another player, or if you're working together, it's not like one player can necessarily be affected to a degree where the other player can't make up for that, so
Yeah, yeah, and it would help to have those things be randomly generated. Like, maybe you shuffle a deck, and everyone draws like a hidden objective card. That way, you're not like tied into one specific thing. It gives you that gameplay, replayability, variety, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, even so far as like, Hero Clicks was basically like a miniatures war game, and there were co-op modes for that, where if you're playing against Galactus, who's like, the the 18-inch tall guy, every turn he has like a turn timer, like a 20-turn timer. So your objective is to beat him in 20 turns. And every turn he has like a series of actions that you do. And so you would click down, but again, I think that that's a little too rigid. There's not enough variety in that, because if you play it enough times, you're like, okay, turn 16, I know he's going to do this, like, and then it
Yeah.
becomes a Souls
Yeah.
game, right?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. That's where I think there can be some creativity of randomization of, the thing where, like, maybe on a player's turn, they get, and I'm just using this word, infected or something that then
Yeah,
makes it where at that point, a strategy that both teams were at the one point be like, well, you can only do this right now. I guess then on my turn, I'll try to figure out what to do, but who knows what random variable then is going to be introduced to me. So I think that's where the co-op works. As long as there's those random variables on turns that make uh, you could have a strategy, but then it gets flipped on its head.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And
cool. That's
and
cool.
I don't know how that would necessarily work in Gundam, and of course, do you want to do one of those things that kind of excuse me, one of those things that kind of veers off the story path, like the canon, because
I like your idea though with, having the agendas because it could just be where I it what if you're playing this Gundam game and it's telling the story and the character you are is randomized? So let's say you're Ayug and someone's Rekoa and someone's Titans and someone's Emma,
yeah,
someone's Ayug and someone's Camille, and later on you're gonna be on different sides. Like,
yeah,
mid-game. That is a cool and it's telling the story,
yeah.
and it uses the miniatures.
I think there's ways to tie it all in together that would make
Yeah.
it a compelling story. Um, Now I think I mentioned Descent earlier was one of those games that one is app driven. So like basically, you
Oh,
load up an
yeah.
app on the iPad or whatever, and it does the dialogue and stuff for you. So it's almost like playing Dungeons and Dragons, but with a robot DM that just tells you what's happening.
Yeah, I think there could be more app integration, I guess, maybe, I mean, I know we talk about and I appreciate limits on certain
Yeah,
mediums, but I guess introducing an app, could be interesting, especially if it's, like, hey, what if the board game is the Gunpla Build Fighters, and you use your phone to kinda scan in or something, and you have and it uses the AR. So, like, you put your Gunpla there, but then you're using the AR to, like, watch it shoot a missile or something. So, a lot of the fun is maybe the experience,
that's
even if
true.
the mechanics are simple. Yeah.
Now I tend to prefer like the unplugged like analog approach.
Yeah. I
But
think that makes it more interesting.
yeah, just because
Yeah.
yeah, I think to myself, like, when would I want to play a board game? It's like, oh, well, when the power's out and I can't play GBO2.
Oh, yeah, no, that's a good point, especially when you wanna have friends or family around a table to play a game and not have electronics out.
Yeah,
I think that's part of the magic is not everyone buried in their cell phone.
right. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Is and you brought up the biggest point is anyone playing these games, or are they just buying it for the miniatures, painting the miniatures, and then all
Yeah.
right, well, that's just part of my collection. I think I've played. I was part of the Dire Wild Kickstarter. I've played that board game maybe 6 times.
Hmm.
That's not a lot for
Yeah.
a game that I guess it was $70 at the time. So I mean, that's
I mean, it's good like, sometimes that's good to get the stuff. Like I was telling you, when I saw this Power Ranger game or Dark Souls or Bloodborne, it's like I kinda just want it. Not that I know I'm gonna get or that FNAF, the Five Nights at Freddy's I was telling you my son got, like, it
yeah,
has the little characters in there. And the board game is the pizza parlor or whatever. So it has its own value in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, tough to
It's
say.
interesting.
It's like, do I want a Gundam board game just because I want more Gundam miniatures, or
Well, also, has there been a stagnation maybe in gameplay elements because people don't necessarily push back on how a game is played because at least they're getting the physical goods.
That's a good point too.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
You get
And I'm only saying this as someone that's into nerdy stuff and this stuff. Rarely do I ever come across people that play board games.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and everyone will complain about a video game, like you and I do it, you know?
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
We'll complain about the mechanics of a board game or of a video
Of a
game. I
video
don't
game.
think a lot of people complain about the mechanics of a board game because they know that it's not going to change. Like, what are they gonna
Yeah,
do, reissue it? Like
but I almost feel though it is important to kinda keep board games top of mind because, like you were saying about power being out, or like when I was talking about removing from electronics, what are some interactive things that use modern sensibilities and mechanics from video games, from using a phone that could be done in a physical area where you don't need cell phones? I think there's more potential there then.
yeah,
At least for someone like me that I'm already into this stuff to find like a fun thing to do. Because so far it's been the game of life, sorry, Monopoly, Uno. That's about it.
yeah, yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of people that are, jumping into I mean, I guess, like, card games are a big thing, like your apples to apples, you know,
Oh,
um,
never heard of that.
what's the adult version of apples to apples? Is the
I've never heard of apples to apples.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically like a judging game where it's like, you have adjectives and everyone's got like nouns in their hand, and like you play an adjective and like everyone has to put down a card that they think is the closest thing to that, and then there's a judge, like you take turns being a judge. Um
Oh, that remind me of this game.
why am I forgetting the name of it?
Yeah, but that reminds me of the game where you were given either like a definition or a description of someone, and everyone has to make up like if you either know what it is or you make up what it is, and then one person reads it all around, and then everyone has to like guess which is the right one or whose is what.
Yeah,
Do you know what I'm talking about? I
yeah,
forget the name
exactly.
of that
I
game.
know exactly what you're talking about. It's on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah, it's like a weird word. I used to play that game with my family a lot. I mean, before when I lived with my parents and all that. Yeah, I
Yeah,
got to get back into that game.
exactly. So yeah, I mean, I think that there's value in it. I don't know how much value, our generation would necessarily get from it being, so heavily into like digital stuff, video games, app-driven experiences, that sort of thing. But I don't know. It's something I'd like to see personally.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think again because I don't ever hear about this stuff, there must be room to improve on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like, as much as I complained about this guy, it's like I haven't even gotten to play it because
Oh, yeah. Well, let
I
me
don't
ask you: is that something that could be played over stream?
maybe it
You would
might
have
be
to do all
worth
the work.
attempting. Um, I will say that it does have one really cool feature that I like, which is it's got a 3D constructed Abaoku map.
Oh, that is cool.
So like Abaoku is this like 12-inch tall like 3D cardboard. Um,
That is actually pretty cool. I would want that in a board game if we were gonna do it. Have like, yeah, 3D terrain on it.
and then this is kind of interesting is that the map itself is not set on a grid or a hex grid. It's like zones.
Hmm,
And so
interesting.
what's unique about that is that like, you would go to these individual zones that are numbered.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, I can't believe I hadn't heard of that. Again, it's the board games seem to be very unless you're specifically looking for board games, you're not gonna hear about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there's it's like a niche corner of the internet that is obsessed with board games like I am.
I will say what's interesting is that the Target near me, there is a whole wall of board games,
Mhm.
and yeah, we'll see things I've never heard of before, and so there
and
must
and
be a market
and they
there.
carry Gloomhaven, like,
Oh, okay.
that's
Yeah.
that's, I think, the most ringing endorsement that these types of co-op dungeon crawler games have potential, is that, like, there is a mass appeal. You can go on Walmart right now and order Gloomhaven.
And
250
so
bucks, but
but Gloomhaven is, like, the big one right now?
that's the
Like, the
big
main one?
one.
Okay, cool.
And then there's one that's similar to it. I think it's Winter something. Forget the name. But those are the two that are from the same publisher that those ones are like the heavy hitters.
Okay, okay. Very interesting stuff to learn, even though there's that crossover. Again, gaming, IPs, like, strategy.
Yeah.
There's a crossover there.
Yeah, and adapting some of those video game mechanics, like I said, no one would ever have thought of making a stealth-based board game if not
Yeah.
for stealth video games doing it first. And then you're like, oh, well, if we come up with ways for the guards to patrol and, like, every turn you flip a card over and it's like, okay, this is how you have to interact with them because of what you're doing.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
there's
very
ways you
cool.
could do it. Um, yeah.
Well, cool.
But yeah, I mean that's all I've got for today. Just a lot of board game talk, and wishful thinking that there might
Yeah.
be a future for Gundam in board gaming. That you know,
You'll have
I
to dive into that one you have and see
yeah
if that is something substantial, because then I might wanna grab it, or that might be incentive for us to maybe, uh, get more, I guess, the voices out there about making a proper modern Gundam board game.
yeah. I mean, like I said, that one came out in 2020 and it doesn't
Yeah,
have
that's
any
crazy.
miniatures in it. Come on, I
Yeah.
bet it would have sold out if they had thrown in just a few. Because
Yeah,
like I said, the
exactly.
Zeta Gundam one, it's they're dated, obviously, being from the 80s, but you have little runners full of mini
Wow.
Hyzaks and Gundam Mark twos. Like,
That's amazing, so you actually build them.
yeah, yeah. So it's like they took Gunpla technology and applied it to a board game.
Would you ever build that?
I've built the Zeta, but I
Oh,
would love to go in and build all of these guys and paint them up. I really love the proportions of them. Let me see if I can get this on camera. They are the appropriate level of, like, chunky.
bottom heavy and
Yeah.
yeah, I see what you
You know
mean.
how I like them.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
We like them thick around here.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, uh, like I said, thank you for indulging me on a topic that I know is probably not one that you would have expected for today. But yeah, like I said, you brought some clever insight to the table on it. So,
Yeah.
and
That
for oh,
that
go
was a
ahead.
good pun, I think. Clever insight to the table.
I I didn't even mean to. Um, but yeah, let us know in the chat if you guys want to see us stream a little gameplay of the Gundam board game. I think
Yeah.
that'd be cool, especially
That
with.
might be something to experiment with on one of your streams, I think. That
Yeah, yeah. We'll get with the Patreon folks and maybe have some players join in. So
Oh,
because I think
yeah.
it's like up to 6 players, so
Oh, that is cool.
that would be the way to
Yeah.
do it. But yeah, Adam also dropped a video about the Double Zeta this morning, which was pretty
That's
sweet. If
right.
you have not seen that yet, go hop on over and check that out because it is a good breakdown of Wave Riders and
The
and
transformation, yeah, it's
transformable
something
components.
I never it's like it's something in passing I knew it did, but I never really looked at how it would really function and stuff, so,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it reminds me a lot of, like, the Power Rangers in Space Megazord, where it's like they have a
Oh, yeah.
spaceship that
That's right.
transforms into their Megazord.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you guys so much for hanging out. Hope you guys enjoyed this look at several board games that use different types of mechanics and how we would probably adapt them into a Gundam game. And like I said, stay tuned for some Gunpla and miniature stuff that I'm going to be working on here. Go check out Adam's video, and we'll see you tomorrow for the Gundam Explained show at 11 Central, 12
That's
Eastern.
right. Yep. Thanks all.
Cheers,
See ya.
everybody.